How I build my Slack agents for real businesses making real money with real team members. Now, I'm going to show you the demo of what my exact setup is in my own Slack for privacy purposes. But every time I roll out a bot-based, agent-based system that lives inside a business, this is what I use. This is recently developed on the latest Slack tech. They recently updated their bot slash agent system to make this way easier, way more streamlined, way more user friendly for the actual end users, and just a lot more secure. And the few tweaks that I've currently made for this system is quite unique, and there's not really other systems that do it this way, and I'll explain why. So, with the new Slack update, it has enabled us to have one Slack app that basically routes any request in any specific channel or when a name is mentioned to a certain agent. And these individual agents actually have their own diary, their own calendar, their own access, their own security. And rather than having to set up individual Slack bots every single time with their own API tokens, with their own connections, with their own security and vulnerabilities, we're now able to ensure that we keep everything in one master connection while then routing to the appropriate agents. This simplifies the backend by so much. It is unbelievable. And with the new agent builder system that Slack have in their API documentations, they have made it so much easier to do this. Whereas before, you would need to have a fair amount of experience understanding how to build agents from scratch, how to use the agent SDKs. But now with the new integrations that Slack have and the templates that you can just give to your agents directly, they can spin up agents like this within minutes. And so at the end of this video, you have a link or to download my exact tech stack, like the exact files that I'm using to run my agents. You will get it all, so you can get your AI to just plug it into your Slack and spin them up. And every new agent only takes a couple of seconds, because every single agent or new employee, what I like to call them, is literally one folder with 4 files in. That is the entire system once you get this in place. And so the way I want you to think of agents is, rather than the traditional where you've probably seen Hermes, OpenClaw, where it's one big agent that just plugs into everything and does everything all at once, I like to split them up as, if I was to hire an employee, what would their role cover, what tools would they use, and how would they actually interact with me? And so my main assistant, I call Otto. And this is the same process for every single new employee, new colleague that I add into the system. We give them a purpose. We put this in the prompts. We give them identity, the way they speak, how I want them to interact with me, the kind of tone I want them to take, because that can vary depending on if they're doing something a bit more creative, like Nadia, who's my ex-content colleague, right? I want them to be a bit more creative, a bit more open, a bit more free-flowing. Marcus, who's managing all of my systems and my backend, I want him to be straight to the point. I want him to be no fluff, pure technical, and just tell me what's going right and what's going wrong. And so this is really nice benefit to have to specify per employee. The diary, each employee has what I call their own diary. Like any employee would, they would have their own things on their schedule that they would want to manage, that they want to check in at the same time every day, things that they want to schedule further down the line. And rather than having one big diary that kind of gets convoluted and mixed up and hard to manage, every single employee has their own diary. Tools, this is for security. This means that Otto has access to more tools than Nadia. Nadia is only going to have access to the tools that she needs to either write content, come up with ideas for content, or work with me to actually edit content. She doesn't need to know what's going on in the code development that Marcus has been working on in the backend for a client. She doesn't need to have access to any of the code bases, right? There's just no need for it. Every time you have to try to have an agent that tries to do multiple tasks like this, you have to then share the access across agents, across employees, whatever you want to call them, which causes risks and issues to appear. They don't need that access. And especially where this is living in a Slack team where there's multiple employees interacting with these agents, you want specific access to specific agents to ensure that your employees can't access parts that they don't need to access, or mess up parts of the business that they don't need to even touch, right? And so this is why that's a really important part. But when it comes to then the overall business calendar and the archive, they share all this. So they have access to my calendar and the overall business calendar. So any mention of meetings and schedules and stuff like that, they all get access to. This is quite, I find, important for a lot of these agents. but it's also they can't write to it. So they can't actually write stuff directly to my calendar. They can write to their own diary to remind me in Slack like an employee would with a DM or a direct message, but my calendar they have access to, so they understand the context of what's going on for me in my business. This is useful for Otto, who's my main operations guy. It's useful for Nadia if she sees a bunch of like maybe calls I'm starting to have in frequency, or maybe prep content after a call that I have and the details that came off that call, things like that. It can vary, but it's good if they all have the same access. And the archive is a unique memory system that I've implemented to ensure that my agents don't get bloated with too much context going on, stacking up over time. And also this applies to kind of all of the back end of my actual work and all the knowledge of my work and my business and my history for them to plug into in my, what we call the company command center. But I'm going to go more into that later. And so going into how this fundamentally works with this kind of system up here, every time I write a message in Slack, the same app, the same agent actually reads it. It identifies who I'm trying to speak to by multiple ways. One, if I've mentioned a name directly, or two, depending on the channel I'm in. Once it's determined who I'm speaking to, it then routes that message to the appropriate agent, and then that agent obviously gets triggered. All of their tools come alive. It has a look at the diary. It has a look at the shared calendar. It has a look at the archive if it needs to pull information based on the message. But that's how it works. Every single message goes to the one Slack app that acts as the router to this system. And again, that really simplifies the infrastructure needed for this kind of system while ensuring maintainability, security, reliability, and also just being able to differentiate who you're speaking to in Slack is just one of those little things that you don't think does a lot, but it actually does. Just seeing a different name and profile picture than you associate to that task actually becomes very, very useful when you're juggling a lot of stuff in your business. And so just going over that again with a graph, one shared calendar they all have access to. So if there's ever anything that comes to do with either meeting clients and pipelines, my operational assistant Otto needs to know about that. He will log things into his diary to remind me, but he will never write back up to the calendar. Same with all three. Nadia, she may need to help me plan when I'm doing posts, when I need to write posts. She's got her own diary to understand when to remind me when to post, but she also has access to my calendar to make sure that she's not setting a reminder of me while I might be in the middle of a meeting or in a client call or things like that. And so again, she can't write back over to it. She maintains her own diary, which gets checked every 5 minutes across all agents to ensure whether they need to remind me of something, if they need to see that something's coming up that I may need a more advanced reminder, or even perhaps Otto wants to prepare me for an upcoming call. So again, as we approach that upcoming call, he's going to let me know of like maybe a bit more about that client, etc. Same for Marcus. I don't want Marcus adding a load of stuff to my calendar based around the back end and the ops and the infrastructure of the business. He keeps that all in his own diary. And if I need to know, he will remind me when the time is right. And then as each agent processes stuff in the business, conversations that we have, anything that gets important that they deem is something that everyone else needs to know, or maybe it's something a bit more long-term that doesn't need to stay in their more recent memory, they offload into the archive. This is where each agent can read from if they find that their own diary doesn't contain the information that they need to kind of retrieve for the task or the question that I've asked them. And so top level, this is kind of the flow that currently goes through. I send a message in a Slack channel or an existing thread. The router picks which colleague it needs to send it to, Otto, Nadia, Marcus, or any more that I make. It then loads everything from that agent into the chat memory, the thread that I've messaged in, the diary, the shared calendar, the shared archive, and then it goes through your standard agent messaging process. It writes out the answer based on all the information it has. It goes deeper if it needs to find the information. And if it realizes it needs to do something, like take action, make a write effect on any bit of document, speak to a client, it always asks for permission. And this is actually built into the code. It can't be kind of guessed around or missed by just general like prompting and claude.md files. It's actually built into the hook of the code that whenever there's a write command, I get flagged. So I actually have to give permission before it does anything. And so it can reply in the Slack thread to ask for that permission before I send it on. Or the other benefit of having these split agents is that sometimes, for example, Nadia, I don't want her to ask for permission every time she needs to read my X content or read my X posts. Or even if she's writing some notes about my X post in the chat or in a document, I don't want to have to keep asking, I don't want to have to keep giving her permission to do that. And so you apply these permission rules per employee, which is exactly the same as you would do this to a real employee of yours in your business. You would give more trust to higher up people or specific people when they do certain things. And again, when each agent has their own purpose and you've really optimized that, there's much less risk of a big generic agent who has access to everything and has to maintain the memory of everything to go do a delete or a message or an email to someone that they shouldn't. The diary, just going in a bit more into it. So every single agent, again, has their own diary. It stores what to check, when to check it, how often to repeat it, and where to speak. This gets checked every single 5 minutes. So this is what you've probably heard of as a heartbeat in OpenClaw, Hermes agent, and other various types of AI assistant agents like that. This is our version of the heartbeat. So we're not building everything from scratch here. We're using like really key elements from these other systems that have worked really well. And so every 5 minutes across all agents, they will check their own diary. They'll check the calendar and they'll figure out if anything's coming up, like I said, that I need to be reminded of, or if there's something that maybe is a bit more in the future, maybe an hour, but is a big enough task where I might need a bit more of a heads up coming up to it. But the trick here is that this is actually coded in. So as a 5 minute check is done, we will actually programmatically check if there's something in that 5 minute bracket. If there isn't, then no prompt gets sent to the AI. If there's something in the half an hour bracket, we'll send a prompt to the AI. And you can change this again depending on the type of agent that you're speaking to, whether it's the assistant, the coach, or the watchdog. The watchdog, I want him to check every 5 minutes to make sure everything is actually up and running. He should always be checking. But the ex-coach, she probably only needs to check every half an hour, right? Because it's not vital that I post a couple posts on X at an exact specific time. Otto, the assistant, I may want him to warn me in advance every hour, like an hour before every single thing that comes up on his diary, because that's more likely to be beneficial for our kind of working relationship then, right? I'm able to get more of a heads up on these more important key tasks that may be coming up. But rather than continuously prompting the agent every 5 minutes across every single assistant, across every single task in my diary, it's actual code that checks these numbers that I've set for each agent, and only then, if it's within that time frame or bracket, will it then send that as a prompt to the agent to then send me a message if it needs to. It'll still have that last determination step, but it's going to be way more reliable because we're not sending every bit of information on the calendar every 5 minutes and asking it to continuously decide whether it's relevant or not. But why Slack, you may be asking? Now, I spend 80% of my time, if I'm doing anything in my business that isn't to do with fulfillment, in Slack. The other 20% might be emails, right? But if I'm doing anything to do with my business, I am in Slack. And when you have to use another whole window just to speak to your assistant agents, it becomes very convoluted. It adds friction, it adds effort. And it means you have to have a whole separate plug to just pull all of that information out from Slack into this whole separate window that you have to keep switching tabs between. And everything I do for myself and for the clients that I serve is trying to eliminate tab switching, eliminate copying and pasting, eliminate additional connections. And so why not, like you would when you hire an employee for yourself, you would have them in Slack. You would have them in the chat interface that you were already using, that you're talking to your clients to, that they can then see how you're speaking to your clients and get that extra bit of information. And Slack has already been working for a good 5, 8+ years, wherever it is now. And they've really polished that whole efficient way of communicating with each other, whether that's through threads, emojis, channels, and it just works and it's proven, and we don't need to reinvent the wheel here. Use the communication tool that is already working across businesses and enterprise and just add employees as AI. It's that simple. The other benefit of this, specifically for me here, this may not be applicable to every type of agency or business, but for a lot, I can imagine it would be. And this is actually a really nice part of my entire workflow here, is that Otto has the exact same view as I do. Every time I have a connection with a client in a shared channel, they get to see every single message and every single thread within that channel. That gets me a couple of things. And especially for Otto, my main assistant, this is beautiful. If I'm having a busy day, if I'm in a meeting and things have started to send, clients of mine have started to interact with me in their own shared channels, or there's been a thread, a reply in a thread that we've been speaking about, or a bug that occurs that needs attention, Otto can see that. The client delivery, that's more Otto's role. Like if we're having a conversation between me and a client, Otto can remind me if I've not replied in a certain amount of time. He'll make a note in his diary and that says client A has replied to this thread, and he will automatically keep reminding me if I, for whatever reason, forget about it, or I maybe clicked on it and clicked off it. If it's a bug or an issue with a bit of software or an automation that we're developing, that's going to be Marcus's job. He's going to identify the bugs that are happening because the one Slack app has access to all of it and it will route the problem to the appropriate person. But this is another big part of having it, instead of having an external second bit of software that I have to use to communicate to my assistant AI agents, it all lives in the Slack agent, the Slack desktop app, where it can already see what I see, and it makes things so much more streamlined. But the real key part of this here is it's plugged into my own company command center. Now, what that is all of the business information across every single department: leads, ads, content, my offer, my Upwork outreach, my emails, my case studies. And I'll pull it up now just so you can see what it looks like. But you can see here, this is where I run my entire business. Every single part of my business that isn't communications in Slack comes through my operating system, my command center here. And in my command center, I have my library, which again contains everything I just said. It's every single part of my business all in one place for these agents to all plug into and understand what's going on, what my latest offer is. There's no confusion because this continuously gets updated with every new part of the business that I add, that I modify, or that I delete. And that's caused that. And what that means is that data doesn't become stale. There's no possibility for them to reference something that isn't accurate and that isn't up to date because it comes from my central source of truth. It can pull from my lead pipeline to see what new leads have came in that day, who's still waiting for a response, who needs an SMS message. It can respond to my funnel insights. Otto can tell me when my ads aren't performing very well. What's the bottleneck in my ads? Maybe in my Upwork proposals, it can tell me that I've not sent enough Upwork proposals for that day to meet my quota and I need to try and hit some more this evening, right? It's all plugged into the same command center, all of the same information, so they can all run with accurate data. And if you do not have this, you're never going to have a good agent system, no matter what you do. And a good example is the video I made about Grokbot. It's really, really easy to set up. There's one click and you've got connected to your tools. But if that information isn't there in a tool, you're not going to have a bot that is going to know what it needs to do, how your business runs, right? If your communications right now are only over WhatsApp and you don't have something like Slack where everything is all consolidated into one place about your client fulfillment information, your client success management, what's going on with your admin team, right? Where is it going to know what your team is doing, how your business runs, other than you manually telling it? And as a business owner, you don't have a lot of time to do that. And realistically, do you even know what's going on in every single part of your business? Most likely not, because that's not your job. As a founder who's managing a team, you focus on the top level, you focus on the North Star of your business, growing the business. And so you have a whole bundles of essays that you basically have to write to your agent just to catch it up. But then the other problem is it's not up to date. You spend a load of effort putting all of that information into the agent. A week or two later, you might pivot your offer slightly. You might completely shut down a part of your business. You might completely change how certain parts are running. You have to go through the whole process again. And so a company command center, a single source of truth, whatever you want to call it, is so vital to ensure that your AI agents are running efficiently, that they're running correctly, that you're not going to have to be recorrecting them over and over and over again. And so this is specifically for me, this part, as an AI automation agency, but I want you to think of how you can kind of adapt this same system to what you do, because this is really part of the client success management here. I have for each one of my clients, a Slack channel that we're in. And within this Slack channel, I might have multiple of their employees all in the same channel. Maybe using a tool that we're currently developing for them. And so I want to be having multiple bits of feedback coming from different employees, maybe any bugs that they report, or even suggestions. And now, before this system was in place, if there was ever anything that came through a Slack message, I would have to, one, make sure that I see it, two, understand what's being said in the context of that employee's project, because I'm juggling multiple projects at a time. It takes even a bit of time just figuring out what they're even talking about, because a lot of the time they're living in the project, they're living in the new tool every single day, because that's the whole point of what we're building for them. When we're building multiple projects for multiple clients, I'm having to go and switch context of all of these different systems. And so it's very unlikely they'll just give the full context of the problem or the feature that they're having. And so I then need to spend time figuring out what they're talking about. I need to go to the AI agent associated with that whole project, understand, talk to it, what's going on, what's the bug that they just experienced, can we recreate it? I have now shortcut all of that entire process with one click. I react with the eyes emojis, and my agent from this one single Slack app understands what client I'm speaking to. It knows where every client, what every client's name is, and ties it to the actual workspace slash repo that is for their project. It then lists that in our issue tracking app, Linear. It figures out all of the appropriate context from that message, writes it in the single issue, and then it does a deep dive. It goes into the code. It tries to figure out proactively what the issue is, and it knows intelligently if this is a bug that they're trying to figure out what's going on, or if it's a feature that needs to be added. It will then autonomously fix the bug or add the feature and add it as a PR for me to review. It's just a link, and I have to click the link and I can look at it like a normal web page. It is offline. It's a private link. It's not affecting the actual live interface that we've built for them, but it lets me, without having to worry about all of that context switching, run through this entire process with just a single click. I can then understand what's going on. I can speak to my own personal agent to give me a bit more context about the solution it's given. I can even get it to record a video of the solution of a bug to make sure that it's fixed. And then when I'm happy, I can send that link to that person who sent the bug issue or the feature, and I can say, hey, here's a separate link for you to review it, make sure it's all good for me. And when they give me the go ahead, I just tell the agent and it switches it over and merges it into the live production. And so just from that entire process, I'm sure you can think of whatever industry or way of fulfillment that you're doing is, how you can kind of transform that entire concept into your industry, into your niche, into your method of fulfillment. And getting into a bit more of the technical side, this is where the memory really comes into its importance. Now, this is actually inspired partially by Victor Tailin on X. He's a brilliant developer, and he's been posting a ton of stuff about memory recently. And he actually released an open source version of, without getting too technical, a tree-based memory system. And our agents use this intelligently. And so as a part of like a cleanup process, when a Slack thread or a message goes quiet for over 30 minutes, a small extra quick cheap agent does a memory pass to understand, okay, what happened in this entire thread or exchange of events? Is there anything useful in here that we should add to memory? It will then add it to that agent's diary as something to remember in its kind of top level memory. But if the diary gets full, or it determines that it's not too important, it adds it directly into the archive. And without getting too technical, the archive works in a way where it slowly adds more and more categories deeper into a tree in a way of compressing it. And I'm not going to pretend to be able to explain this really well. If you want to really understand this, go to the open source GitHub that Victor has linked on his X profile. He explains it so much better than me. But effectively, I almost consider it like the difference between your conscious and your subconscious, right? The conscious is the diary file. That's where the really recent notes stay. That's where the stuff that is very frequently used stays. But then as stuff goes beyond that frequent usage or importance, it goes into that kind of the subconscious, the distant memory, where, you know, when it takes a while you to remember something that you're thinking about, or remember a part of a thing that you need for whatever you're doing. It's almost the same way here. The agent, when it's trying to recall memory or recall a bit of information, it starts with the diary, because that's the part that the most recent information, the more frequently used information lives. But as it discovers that the information isn't there, it slowly goes into the archive, and it goes deeper and deeper and deeper into that tree to actually figure out where the information lies. And that's just so it's efficient, so we're not stuffing every little bit of information all into its memory. Just because that's when you start to have all of these problems that agents so commonly face, where they either don't even remember what you're trying to tell them, they completely forget, or they just start bringing up the wrong thing for the relevant topic that you're discussing. And I'm not going to say this is perfect. This is definitely not the best memory implementation out there, but it works for me, and that's all I need. And really what this all comes down to, based on the problems that I used to face having to spin up a new agent every single time, is that it literally takes under 60 seconds for a new agent to be spun up, because of the simplicity in this file structure, because every single new assistant is 4 files in a folder and it all reuses the same major connection in the routing system. It's so easy to spin up a new agent. But it doesn't mean that you just do that willy-nilly, right? That's where problems happen. When you start spinning up multiple agents and you see these videos or these pictures on X or LinkedIn where someone has 20 separate agents all running their entire business. No, that makes it more complicated, and it ends up making you take more time to do anything that you're trying to do, because all of the work is split between so many different people that you don't even know what half of them are doing at the time. They're wasting more time spreading information between them and sharing bits of information that another one might need to do the specific task, that it just makes the whole thing just too complicated. It's just stupid. It's pretty much only for social media at that point, just to make it look fancy, right? You can get away with just key agents that take over entire departments of your business, build them in an intelligent, smart way as you need them, not just at the very start. You just start with 10 agents that do try and juggle everything. Wait till you actually need an agent. Wait till you discover that repetitive instance of work that you continuously have to do at the same time every day. Only then you think, okay, I've done this many times in the last week. I now realize that if I had an employee for this role, for this specific task, it would take 80% of it off my plate very, very efficiently without much extra work that I need to input. That's when you bring in a new agent, and your AI can spin it up within 60 seconds. And so this is really the beauty of this system. It's the reusability. It's the packaging of it where your AI can just spin up new systems or new agents, new employees, whatever you want to call them, when you need it. And yes, you have to do this externally. You can't ask an agent to do it for you for security reasons. You do not want your employees to be able to spin up a completely new agent slash employee and be able to define all of the access that it has across your entire system. This is to be locked behind either you, your IT department, your AI engineer, or us if you want us to do it for you. Now I'm going to give you this entire source code for this entire project. You'll be able to implement this into your Slack by just giving it to your agent and explaining it what you want it to do. In the file, I'm going to have a specific file that your agent will read to be able to install this a lot easier, and it will ask you a couple questions on how you want this set up. It will guide you through the process. It will tell you what to run, how to actually get it connected to your Slack, and you'll be good to go. But again, don't just start with 20 agents from the get-go. Start with one. Start with the Otto of your business. Let that get a good idea of how your business runs. Make sure that you have your company command center or your central source of truth. If you don't, work with Otto to build it. Work with your AI agent to build it. Work with your coding tool of choice to build it. Because again, these agents will not work as well as you want them to without all of your information in one place. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. I'll reply to every single one, or join the school community where I answer all of the questions that get posted. It's where you'll get the source code for this material and all the other projects I've built on my YouTube channel. Speak soon.